The Holocaust is the English term used to describe the genocide of about 6 million Jews by the Nazis during World War II.
After the end of World War I, Germany became a republic. Men and women had the right to vote for members of the new parliament. But during the 1920s, no political party won enough votes to run a successful government.
When the Great Depression started in 1929, it hit Germany especially hard. The country was still struggling to recover from the war, trying to pay reparations and make up for the loss of colonies that had been taken away by the conquering Allies. Germany was also deeply in debt to the United States, which had lent the government money to rebuild the country.
In the early 1920s, Germany suffered through a period of extreme inflation, which is a rising of prices and a sharp drop in buying power of money. German money became almost worthless, while prices increased more than 100 times. In the 1930s, German prosperity depended on a trade with other countries who tried to protect their own industries during the Depression. Many of those countries stopped importing German goods. As a result, German industries laid off workers. The standard of living of many Germans was destroyed, and many people faced homelessness and starvation.
As economic conditions grew worse, some Germans began to look for a strong leader who could fix their country. Adolf Hitler's National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party, started to gain support. After many failed attempts, Hitler was elected to lead Germany in 1933.
Once in power, Hitler dissolved the parliament and declared the start of the Nazi Reich, or Empire, with himself as dictator. The state ruled in all matters: economic, social, political, military, and cultural. Freedom of the press and freedom of the assembly were suspended, and postal, telegraph, and telephone communications were no longer private.
In Germany, Adolf Hitler promised that he would restore people's national pride by making their country the leading nation on earth. Hitler said he would accomplish this by refusing to recognize the Treaty of Versailles, rebuilding Germany's armed forces, and reclaiming the lost territories, as well as restoring the superiority of the Aryan race, white European, of which the Germanic and Nordic peoples were the purest. Nazi propaganda experts used radio, movies, public address systems, and giant posters to keep Hitler's image and message before the public.
The master race of German people were called on to build an empire, the Third Reich, that would last for 1,000 years. For this to happen, Nazi leaders said Germany must rid itself of anyone such as socialists, Jews, Roma, homosexuals, and people with disabilities, who were considered inferior, or who were challenged the state's perspective.
From elementary school through university, students were taught Nazi values and were shielded from ideas that challenged these values. History books were rewritten to glorify Germany's past, and in the summer of 1933, ultranationalist university students burned books as a part of an action against the un-German spirit.
The night of November 9th, 1938, became known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. Gangs of Nazi thugs destroyed Jewish synagogues, businesses, community centers, and homes throughout Germany and Austria. They beat up Jewish people, broke windows, and desecrated cemeteries.
In years before World War II, many people in countries that had experienced the terrible costs of World War I and the Great Depression believed that avoiding another war was one of their most important national interests. As a result, they hoped that appeasement was the best policy when Adolf Hitler and the Nazis began to expand Germany's territory in Europe. Not everyone agreed that appeasement would work. Early in 1939, Hitler took over the Czechoslovakia. Appeasement had failed.
On the 27th of January, 1945, the Soviet army liberated the largest camp of all, Auschwitz-Birkenau. When the Soviets finally arrived, they found only 7,650 people alive in Auschwitz. Many of these were young children.
A Adolf Hitler is said to be held responsible for World War II for the reason that whoever lost the war is held responsible, and Germany was defeated again in World War II and were rightly held responsible a second time.
Two large and ongoing international needs emerged as World War II was ending. The first was retribution for the perpetrators, and the second was the resettlement of people uprooted by the war. 7 to 9 million people were displaced by the end of the war. At the end of 1945, 1.5 million to 2 million displaced persons did not want to return to their homes, fearing economic and social repercussions or even annihilation. About 10% of these people were Jewish.
The Allies set up displaced persons camp in Germany, which American, British, and French military controlled and the United Nations took care of. While some of the international community were focusing on the survivors of the Holocaust, others were dealing with punishing the perpetrators.
The Allied troops were so outraged at what they found in concentration camps that they demanded German civilians directly to confront the atrocities. U.S. troops led compulsory tours of concentration camps to the neighboring population.
Some German citizens were forced to partake in the burial of countless corpses found in the camps. Another more formal punishment was being discussed in the courtroom. Of the many post-war trials, those held in Nuremberg are the most well-known.
During the last years of the war, responding to reports of death and labor camps, the Allied countries created a War Crimes Commission and began the process of listing war criminals with the intent to prosecute.
After the war, the International Military Tribunal was chartered. It composed of the 4 Allied nations, the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and was charged with the task of prosecuting major Nazi war criminals.
The main legacy of the Holocaust was the 6 million Jews that died during that time. Also, genocide has been made a crime under international law, and racism has become unacceptable in many societies where it is previously accepted.
Among the international military tribunals, conclusions were the following.
A war of aggression in any form is prohibited under international law.
The individual is responsible for crimes carried out under superior orders.
The Gestapo, Nazi Party, SS, NSA were criminal organizations.
The leaders and organizers of these criminal organizations were guilty of crimes carried out by others in executing the criminal plan. In conclusion, though it's impossible to determine the exact number of Jewish victims, it's estimated of the 11 million people who were killed during the Holocaust, 6 million were of Jewish descent. 1.5 million of the murdered were children, of which 1.2 million were of Jewish descent. On the 30th of April, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide. On the 8th of May, 1945, the Nazis surrendered.